You've got the engine revved, like, entirely to the red line. Your foot is practically slamming the gas pedal straight through the floorboard. But, and here's the kicker, the parking brake of reality is completely stubbornly stuck.
Yeah, it's a universally maddening state to be in.
It really is. I mean, you are burning premium fuel, making a massive amount of noise, and going absolutely nowhere.
Right. And when we find ourselves in that scenario, the sheer kinetic energy we have, it just has nowhere to go.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
Oh, absolutely. And the tragic irony here is that our typical reactions to that specific kind of stuckness, they almost always guarantee we do permanent damage to our own engines.
Exactly, which is why we're taking a completely different approach today. Welcome to this deep dive into the mind key to the I Ching.
Glad to be here for this one.
So our mission today is incredibly focused. We are decoding the psychological blueprint of a single, highly specific configuration in this ancient Chinese text, a hexagram known as Xiao Chu.
Right, which roughly translates to small accumulation.
Small accumulation, yeah. And let me just set the ground rules for you listening right up front. We are leaving the mysticism and, esoteric fortune-telling at the door.
Totally.
What we're doing is translating a thousands of years old framework into hard, practical, everyday survival tactics. This is essentially an operational manual for those moments when you have all the drive, all the talent, and all the funding in the world, but your environment simply refuses to let you move forward.
Yeah, and to really grasp that operational manual, we first have to we have to feel the environment it was designed for.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So the ancient text uses this brilliant, highly sensory core metaphor for this specific condition. It says, dense clouds, no rain.
Ooh, dense clouds, no rain.
Right. So imagine that heavy, just oppressive atmosphere on like late July afternoon. The air is thick, the barometric pressure is plunging, and you're sweating just standing on the pavement.
Ugh, I can literally feel that.
You're looking up, right? You're just waiting for a massive thunderstorm to break and finally clear the air. But the storm just hovers.
It flat out refuses to rain.
Exactly. It refuses.
That is such a visceral feeling. You can't breathe properly, you can't focus, and the anticipation actually becomes exhausting. It's an oppressive anticipation.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's unpack the anatomy of this very specific flavor of being stuck. Because the hexagram itself, it's a visual symbol made of two halves, right? Representing a structural conflict.
Right. So if you look at it, the lower half of the hexagram represents your internal state. In this system, it's called heaven, which signifies pure, unadulterated drive.
Pure drive.
Yeah. You are a high-powered locomotive operating at maximum capacity. You possess the strategic plans, the vaulting ambition, the relentless energy.
But then there's the top half.
Exactly. The upper half, representing your external environment, is wind. And wind is a soft, diffuse, and formless constraint.
Formless constraint. So it is fundamentally different from, say, hitting a solid brick wall.
Completely different.
Because if I hit a brick wall in my career or on a project, I know what to do. I go find a sledgehammer.
All right, you just break it.
Yeah, I have a tangible enemy that I can apply blunt force trauma against. But this Xiao Chu situation, it's more like trying to sprint a marathon underwater.
Sprinting underwater, yes.
Or to put it in a modern context, imagine being a highly capitalized tech startup. You've got millions in venture funding, a brilliant engineering team, your product is flawless, you are ready to disrupt the market.
Right.
But your entire launch is stalled by a minor, unexplainable, utterly opaque bureaucratic permit sitting on a desk in a zoning office somewhere.
The worst.
It's the worst. You are essentially punching cotton. You can't fight it because there is nothing solid enough to actually hit.
And see, when you punch cotton, the laws of physics dictate that the force you exert has to go somewhere.
Right.
Since it can't break the target, it bounces back into the system as internal heat. You just get increasingly dangerously agitated.
Oh, wow.
So to survive this pressure cabin without blowing a gasket, the framework lays out 3 baseline mentalities. And the very first mandate is to simply accept the critical state.
Which basically translates to stop staring at the sky, getting furious that it isn't raining.
Exactly. The humidity is a physical fact. The holding pattern is a physical fact.
Yeah.
Staring at the sky, constantly refreshing your email inbox, waiting for that zoning approval, constantly asking your team, did they call back yet? That is a massive leaking drain on your cognitive energy.
You have to accept the heavy air as your current unchangeable reality.
You do. And the second mentality requires a shift in focus. The ancient text explicitly notes that the clouds rise from the the western suburbs, which in their historical context meant the immediate local vicinity.
Okay, so you stop looking for macro breakthroughs on the horizon and you start looking at your own backyard.
Exactly right.
So if the global product launch is stalled by regulators, you stop obsessing over the launch and you start fixing the messy internal communication processes of your own team.
You localize your vision. And that brings us to the third mentality, the principle of soft penetration.
Soft penetration.
Yeah. You cannot punch your way through a soft, yielding net. If you take a heavy spear and thrust it into a woven net, the net simply gives way, tangles around the spearhead, and actually holds it even tighter.
Oh, that's a brilliant image.
To get through a net, you have to adopt the properties of wind. You find the microscopic gaps and apply gentle, continuous, pervasive pressure.
Okay, so in theory, acting like the wind sounds incredibly zen and highly effective. But let's be honest about human nature for a second here.
Sure.
Let's talk about what we actually do when we get frustrated. Because our default setting is to completely break our own wheels.
We really do.
And this moves us into the lower half of the hexagram's progression, right? Which deals directly with our ego and our initial, usually deeply flawed psychological reactions to being stalled.
Right. The text walks through the predictable stages of our agitation.
And that first stage introduces a concept that feels, honestly, deeply uncomfortable for a modern audience. It advises a retreat to the original path, a return to the baseline.
Yeah. When you feel that first soft resistance, that first subtle tangling of the net around your spear, the instruction is to step back. You pull your energy and your focus back to where you originally started before the resistance even occurred.
See, I have to push back on this entirely.
I thought you might.
Well, because everything in our modern culture tells us the exact opposite. We are conditioned by hustle culture. The prevailing wisdom is no pain, no gain.
Right. Keep grinding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you hit an obstacle, you pivot, you disrupt, you grind harder. Stepping back at the very first sign of friction feels identical to giving up.
I know, it feels like giving up to the ego. But from a systems design perspective, it is a fundamental engineering principle. It's called a fail-safe.
A fail-safe. Okay.
Yeah, think about how a complex, multi-million-dollar piece of machinery operates. When an advanced software program encounters an unpredictable variable, or, say, a server gets overloaded, it doesn't blindly keep pushing operations forward until the motherboard melts.
Right, it crashes safely.
Exactly. It is programmed to revert to a safe default state, to prevent a catastrophic, unrecoverable failure.
Which is entirely counterintuitive to how we are trained to work. I mean, we view persistence as the ultimate virtue.
We do.
But you are saying that blind persistence in the wrong environment is actually a system failure. It's like when your laptop completely freezes. You don't solve the problem by smashing the keyboard harder and faster.
Please don't do that.
Right. You force a restart. You bring the entire system back to the baseline.
Precisely.
Yeah.
When you are operating in this dense clouds environment, early calibration is what saves your resources.
So what's the practical application there?
The practical application is to establish a strict pause threshold for yourself.
A pause threshold.
Yeah. If you're trying to push a project forward and you encounter inexplicable friction 3 times, maybe a key stakeholder doesn't reply, a file gets corrupted, and a minor petty disagreement flares up in a meeting, you walk away.
You step back from the freezing laptop?
You step back. It is a highly strategic retreat designed to protect your core assets from your own frustration.
Okay, but let's follow the psychological progression here. Taking a 10-minute pause doesn't magically solve the problem.
No, it doesn't.
When you inevitably step back up to the desk, the resistance is still there, waiting. And that triggers a completely different defense mechanism. The text refers to this second stage as the feeling of being pulled back by a safety rope.
Right. You attempt to move forward again, but you feel this distinct, heavy drag. You are being pulled backward by external forces.
Back what?
In a professional setting, this might manifest as a highly cautious business partner who keeps asking annoying, granular questions.
Oh, we all know one of those.
Or it could be a sudden mandated shrinking of your departmental budget, or a new industry regulation you completely failed to anticipate.
And this is exactly where the shadow side of our ambition takes over. When we feel that drag, our ego instantly defaults to paranoia. We assume the drag is intentional sabotage. We think my business partner is jealous of my vision. Or the finance department hates innovation and wants me to fail. We view the tether as an enemy.
We personalize the friction. But if we pull back and view the entire organizational ecosystem, this dynamic is actually the checks and balances system working flawlessly.
Wait, really? Flawlessly.
Yes. Remember, you are a high-powered engine operating in a low-traction environment. If you floor the gas pedal on black ice, you spin out and total the car.
That makes total sense.
Those annoying, frustrating constraints, the cautious partner, the tight budget, are literally your brake pads. They're preventing a fatal crash.
Wow. So the person telling you, like, we absolutely cannot afford to scale this right now isn't the villain of your story. They are the tether keeping you from flying off the cliff into bankruptcy.
Exactly.
Which begs the question, what happens if we let the paranoia win? What if we cut the tether, ignore the brakes, and just floor the gas pedal anyway because we are so desperate for a breakthrough?
The ancient text provides a stark, incredibly vivid image for that exact scenario.
Hit me.
It warns the spokes fall off the wagon wheel. Husband and wife turn against each other.
The spokes fall off the wheel. That is a terrifying visual for anyone trying to build something.
It is. And to understand why it happens, we have to look at material science, specifically a concept called fatigue fracture.
Fatigue fracture.
Yeah. If you take a rigid, highly structured object and force it repeatedly against a soft, unyielding, diffuse barrier, like our net, you do not break the barrier.
Because it just absorbs the blow.
Right, the net simply absorbs and dissipates the kinetic energy. What you break is your own internal structure. The constant vibrating stress creates microscopic cracks within the rigid object.
Oh, wow.
Eventually, the wagon wheel shatters from the inside out. Not because the obstacle was so hard, but because the wheel was subjected to a type of stress it was never engineered to handle.
If we map that to human psychology, those microscopic cracks are like the buildup of cortisol. It is chronic stress, adrenal fatigue, and executive dysfunction. You push so hard against an unmoving bureaucracy that you literally burn yourself out.
You shatter from the inside out.
And the second part of that warning, husband and wife turning against each other, that represents the relational collapse, right?
Yes.
Because you are so exhausted and desperate to force a breakthrough that clearly isn't happening, you turn your frustration on your own support system. You snap at your spouse, you fire your most reliable vendor, you alienate your most loyal employees.
The internal system collapses entirely because the leader refused to respect the weather conditions.
That is so powerful.
And the actionable takeaway for you here is critical. When you feel that rising, desperate urge to flip the table or to send that blistering, scorched earth email because a major project is delayed, you must implement an emergency fuse blow.
An emergency fuse blow.
You have to physically remove yourself from the environment. If you don't, your spokes are going to snap, and you will inflict permanent structural damage on your career or your life over what is essentially a temporary weather pattern.
Okay, so we have a very clear map of how to avoid destroying ourselves. But mere survival isn't enough, right? We can't just sit in the waiting room forever with our hands folded.
No, definitely not.
How do we actually generate progress when the air is still thick? This brings us to the upper half of the hexagram, which shifts our focus away from our internal frustration and toward the restrictive environment itself. This is the nurturing phase.
Right, so we transition from managing the friction of the engine to learning how to actually thrive inside the pressure cabin.
Okay, how do we do that?
The first step in this phase is what the text calls touching the ceiling. It marks the psychological turning point where you finally truly accept the boundary.
It reminds me of a culinary constraint.
Oh, how so?
Imagine you want to bake an incredibly complex, multi-layered cake, but you look in the pantry and realize you only have half the necessary ingredients.
Right.
You have two choices. You can stand in the kitchen and scream at the refrigerator about the missing ingredients, achieving nothing. Or you can accept the boundary. You say, okay, this is the exact inventory I possess. I am going to focus all my culinary technique on making the absolute best possible dish with these specific constraints.
That culinary analogy aligns perfectly with the theory of constraints in systems management.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In any complex process, whether it's manufacturing, software development, or even personal productivity, there is always a bottleneck. The bottleneck dictates the maximum throughput of the entire system.
Makes sense.
Our instinct is to obsess over magically widening the bottleneck, but sometimes you simply don't have the authority or the resources to do so. The true goal of the theory of constraints is to optimize every single process around that limitation.
Around the limitation.
Yes. The ancient text is telling you to stop fighting the ceiling and instead draw a precise boundary map.
A boundary map. Meaning, you identify your top 3 immovable limitations. Maybe you are severely constrained by a lack of time, a frozen budget, and a skeletal staff.
Right.
You accept those limitations not as temporary annoyances, but as fundamental laws of physics for the time being, like gravity. And once you stop wasting energy trying to defy gravity, you use that energy to polish the details inside your box to absolute perfection.
The moment you fully accept the dimensions of your box, a fascinating shift occurs. Because you are no longer burning massive amounts of fuel trying to push vertically through an unbreakable ceiling, you suddenly find yourself with a surplus of energy.
Oh, that's interesting.
And because energy cannot be destroyed, it begins to spread horizontally. This is the stage of resource spillover.
Because you stop trying to aggressively summon a thunderstorm, you realize you have a little bit of water left over in your own watering can.
Exactly. In ecological sciences, this behavior is observed in the formation of microhabitats.
Microhabitat.
Yeah, consider a harsh, unforgiving macro environment like an arid desert. Life doesn't simply give up and die because the overarching conditions are brutal. Instead, it finds a tiny shaded crevice under a rock where a minuscule amount of condensation gathers in the mornings.
Wow.
It focuses all its biological energy there, building a thriving, complex, highly resilient ecosystem right inside that microhabitat. You are advised to do the exact same thing with your professional or personal energy.
You share your excess capacity with your immediate neighbors without demanding a massive immediate return on investment.
Exactly.
Let's elevate that to a modern corporate environment. Say your massive career-defining project is completely stalled by a 6-month legal review.
A classic desert scenario.
The macro environment is a desert. Instead of spending 6 months complaining about the legal department, you take that stalled kinetic energy and you use it to intensely cross-train your junior team members. You do deep dive research into a peripheral market.
Yeah.
You build a microhabitat of excellence in an area you usually ignore. You are taking stalled vertical energy and using it to expand your horizontal foundation.
And by doing that, you are quietly forging alliances, reinforcing your infrastructure, and creating dense, unshakable value right in your own backyard.
It's brilliant.
You are actually accumulating real power, which is the essence of small accumulation. You were just doing it in a direction you didn't originally plan for.
But logically, the weather eventually has to break. The waiting room doors have to open. And that brings us to the final stage of the hexagram, the climax of the entire process.
Right. The dense clouds finally yield, the barometric pressure snaps, the rain falls.
Finally.
A small, tangible victory is achieved. The bureaucratic permit clears, the stalled budget is released, the client finally signs the contract.
And the natural, deeply ingrained human temptation at this exact euphoric moment is to instantly double down.
Oh, absolutely.
The momentum is back. You feel like a dog let off the leash. You want to make up for all the lost time, so you want to press the gas pedal straight through the floorboard and just conquer the world.
Yet, the ancient text issues its most severe, counterintuitive warning right here at the moment of victory.
What does it say?
It says, stop. The moon is almost full, and if you push further, disaster will strike.
Wait, if you finally get the green light, and you've been preparing this whole time, why on earth would you stop?
Because the underlying macro environment hasn't fundamentally altered its nature. You received a localized rain shower. You did not experience a global climate shift.
Oh, wow.
In system dynamics, ignoring this reality leads directly to a phenomenon known as overshoot.
Overshoot.
Overshoot occurs when a system is pushed far past its actual carrying capacity because the operators are blinded by recent short-term success. The infrastructure cannot support the new velocity, and the entire system collapses under its own weight.
You know, I've seen this happen with startups. They grind for years, they finally secure one major enterprise client, and the founders get so euphoric they immediately hire 30 new people, lease a massive new office, and triple their marketing spend.
And what happens?
They treat a rain shower like a monsoon, and 6 months later, they're entirely out of cash and have to lay everyone off.
They push past the full moon. You have to recognize that this small victory is the absolute structural limit of what your current system can safely handle.
So what's the move?
The operational mandate for you here is to set a strict take-profit line, much like a disciplined hedge fund manager. When you secure that small win, when the rain finally falls, you pack up your tools.
You enjoy the damp soil.
You enjoy the damp soil. You consolidate your new gains and stabilize your expanded foundation. You do not try to force a Category 5 hurricane out of a passing shower.
The discipline required to know exactly when to stop winning might be the rarest skill of all. This entire journey through the Xiao Chu blueprint completely upends how we are taught to operate.
It really does.
I mean, this isn't a loud cinematic story of glorious conquest. There are no trumpets sounding, no brick walls being dramatically smashed to pieces. It is a quiet, highly strategic game of microaccumulations and resource preservation.
It is the refined art of surviving the waiting room without losing your mind, alienating your allies, or destroying your own structural integrity.
So to you listening right now, I want you to think about that specific project, that relationship, or that major career goal where you currently feel totally suffocated by low-pressure clouds. You are revving the engine, and the parking brake is completely stuck.
We've all been there.
Stop trying to aggressively summon a hurricane. Put the sledgehammer away. Stop obsessing over the macro environment you cannot control, and start watering your immediate garden. Accept the boundaries as physical laws. Map your constraints. Spread your excess energy horizontally into microhabitats.
It requires a profound fundamental shift in how we measure our own competence. We live in a society that is completely addicted to the narrative of breaking through, of relentless disruption, of constantly forcing the issue.
We build monuments to the people who smash through walls.
We do. But if you look deeply at the enduring observational wisdom of the I Ching, it poses a much harder, much more sophisticated question.
Which is?
It makes you wonder, what if the ultimate test of your capability isn't how hard you can press the gas pedal when the road is clear? What if the waiting room isn't actually a delay in your journey, but rather the ultimate evolutionary filter?
Oh, that's profound.
The true test might be how elegantly and how strategically you can idle your engine when the universe turns on a red light.
Because eventually the weather will break, the light will turn green. And when it finally does, you want to make sure your wagon wheels are actually intact enough to make the journey.